Okay, welcome back, everyone. Once again, an invitation to turn your cameras on. I think the last session was a little bit challenging because of some internet difficulties, but in this session would be great if you'd have your camera on just so we can have more intimate interaction with everyone and we can see your faces and reactions and see how everyone is doing. Thank you so much, Fatima, for that last session. It was such a treat to see your photography and hear your thoughts and reflections. It's now my pleasure to welcome Nada and Yasmin, both of whom are, Yasmin and I are Facebook friends. We haven't hung out that much. Nada and I are much closer friends, and we've been able to work on a number of different things together. But Nada is Palestinian and Yasmin is Rohingya. And both of them bring unique perspectives about what it means to be Muslim on Turtle Island for those reasons, for those pieces of identity that they hold, as well as many others. So it's my pleasure to welcome them to share some of their thoughts and perspectives with us this morning. And then once again, we'll have some time for presentation and some time for discussion. And I suspect that this will be a very dialogic discussion as well, knowing the two of them. So I'll hand over to Nada to introduce herself and then get us going.
Perfect. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay? Is my sound mic good? Perfect. Well, really nice to be here with you all. I see so many familiar faces and names. It's good. Asif, I feel like I have to give you special attention. Joining us all the way from South Africa. It's good to see you. Yeah, so my name is Nada. I'm really feeling quite humbled actually to be asked to be in this space and be talking about what it means for me to be, Palestinian and on unceded stolen land, and making some of this, like sharing some of my reflections. Of course, no one has the answer, but just, some of the questions that I sit with often, in relation to being on this land. And I am especially humbled that I'm here with Yasmin. Yasmin and I have actually been more than Facebook friends for a while. At least, I don't know when I met you, Yasmin, probably like more than 7-8 years. I don't actually know when we met, but it's been a while. I don't know how I want to introduce myself aside from saying, just been here for over 10 years. 15, closer to 15 years now, actually. And I've been doing a lot of work around what it means, migrant justice, and mostly around supporting racialized migrants here. I used to be a bit more involved in the Muslim community than I do now, but I'm feeling quite, I feel like there is a responsibility as a Muslim person living here. Like what is our responsibility to our Muslim community? How can we be more in solidarity with each other, but also with the indigenous folks here. But before, maybe I'll do a bit of a deeper introduction about myself or my story when it's my part to actually, my time to speak. I'm gonna be passing it to Yasmin in a bit, but I think how we envision the session today is like over the next hour or so. Yasmin will be sharing a little bit about her story and what it means, and some of the struggles and challenge. Well, challenges sounds like a really light word, but what's happening with unfortunately with the Rohingya community and the oppression that they face, and then I will do the same, a little bit more about Palestine and my story, my journey basically, and then Yasmin and I will be asking each other some questions and just reflecting out loud for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for a larger discussion with everyone. So I'm sure there's a wealth of knowledge in this space, and we would be more than happy to hear from you as well. Yasmin, I'm just going to pass it to you, so feel free to introduce yourself and share your slides.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin Ullah. I am a Rohingya human rights activist. I came here to Canada in 2011. I was born in Northern Rakhine State, where our ancestral land is, and unfortunately, around 1990s onward, there had been a lot of mass violence that was state-sponsored, and it sort of pushed a lot of my people out. So my family was basically part of those group of people, and we left to Thailand in 1995. We were there for about 16 years. We had to live under a very, very precarious condition because we were not there under any state's protection, not our own, not the state that we sought refuge in. So coming here, sort of having been able to ground myself a little bit, understanding what it means to be able to now have relative safety, really helped me to understand and conceptualize what it means for other people, who are still sort of struggling with the same conditions that I've lived in. So I decided that my skills or my ability to speak might be better suited to actually advocate for the community that I came from. So I started my work about four years ago, and I actually met Nada like very, very early on. It's been 10 years, but it's such a, again, it's such a privilege to be here, and I still am grappling with the idea that I'm on a settler colonial state. I'm, in an unceded land, but at the same time, these same states have actually uprooted my people as well, or at least have a hand in it, complicit in some of those afflictions. So should I begin with my slides, or Nada, would you do it?
How about you share your slides, right? You can just, yeah, how about you share?
So let me start. Okay, all right. Give me 1 second. So a little bit about the Rohingya people is that we are from the area. Okay, I hope you can see my screen okay. Perfect. We are actually from this area. If you don't know where it is, that's okay. We're from a country called Myanmar, and Myanmar actually changed the name from Burma, which was also a colonial name that the British gave us. But the area that we're from is the northwestern part of a state called Rakhine State, and the red area right here, like the small red area, is where we resided. Currently, there are only 600,000 people left in our country because of the various mass violence that were state-sponsored and various attempts to actually push us out. Currently, there had been a lot of talks around basically determining that this was an act of genocide. This were actually acts of genocide repeatedly done in order to annihilate my group of people. But it was also infused in sexual and gender-based violence. It was also infused in inflicting generational trauma. So currently, right now, there are less than around 600,000 people left, but most people who are living, most Rohingya that you would find is actually in Bangladesh, the neighboring country. And you can see that there are a lot of people in and around, the southern region of Asia, and including the Southeast Asian region. I happen to be from Thailand, but the conditions in other countries, including in Myanmar, are very, very squalid. People do not have any sort of protection at all. And if you look at all of these numbers, not all of these people are actually living freely, in and around the country. Some of them are actually in detention. The discriminations that happened to us, leading up to a lot of violence that happened, this is outside of the realm of violence, is the denial of self-identification. They would call us Bengali or Kalar, which is a very, very derogatory term, instead of calling us Rohingya. There are also limits to rights of marriage, intermarriage, and bear children. There is a limit that is put out by the state officials that we are not, we're not allowed to hold certain ceremonies or have this many kids, and intermarriage between Buddhist or like intermarriage between Rohingya and other ethnic groups are not allowed. there are limits to movement. If you want to move farther than your village, you'd have to attain a permission. If you don't get the permission, you'd have to pay a hefty amount of bribes. This comes in really, this becomes a real obstacle when people actually need medical attention. Apart from actually being denied services at the health facilities, they're also denied the ability to move. So people within Rakhine State, within areas that are heavily populated by Rohingya, which is also ghettoized, usually are not able to actually get the travel or get to move outside of the state unless you have a lot of money, which a lot of people don't, because since the state have made it very, very clear to discriminate us in terms of denying our rights to education and other empowering elements to help us be able to move in the upward social mobility, the ability for us to do more than fish and farm is just very limited. So there are also forced labors where the military would actually try to come in and recruit a lot of people, mostly men, to go and build their military bases around Rakhine State. There's also denial of due process. There's also segregation, like I've said so. There's also a lot of weaponizing of Buddhism for political control. Since Myanmar is a very, very staunch Buddhist country, Buddhism has been used to actually have been crafted as a role model type of model citizen type of basically narrative in order for people to basically alienate any other identities that exist in and around the country, because there are more than hundreds of ethnic minorities that speak different languages, that actually have different cultures. But Buddhism has been used to actually control and basically become a device for the leadership and the military of Myanmar to inflict more pain, inflict more harms onto these different communities. And the last thing that I'm going to leave you with is this map right here. This is called Jokpyu Port on the left, and on the right is after the most current mass violence that actually rendered people, over 800,000 people to leave Myanmar, to leave their own homelands. Over 300 villages have been burned. Lots of sexual and gender-based violence have been inflicted on women. Women were kept alive for the purpose of carrying trauma, and men were actually shot down. They were tortured, they were arbitrarily arrested, or they were actually burnt with the villages that they were from. This was the purpose, one of it at least. A construction of a pipeline was completed in 2018. And that pipeline actually carried the gas, the natural gas that Rakhine State have abundance of, right up to Kunming, Yunnan state of China. And that was done on the ancestral land of the Rohingya people and Rakhine people. And this was very much purposefully done in order to dispossess the land, take away our resources, and push us out so that we can never come back in with the trauma. And sexual and gender-based violence have been proven to actually be done or inflicted by the Myanmar authority, by the Myanmar military, in order to basically prevent any more Rohingya to be able to come back. And which is why to this day, we are still, this is just the burnt villages compared to the intact villages that are of the Rakhine Buddhist people. And this is the bulldozing, the destroying of the evidence that come, this is all documented by satellite image by Human Rights Watch. And this is the condition that we're currently living in now. This is under a tarp and bamboos that we're living in. There's very poor circulation, and it's a very squalid condition. I'm going to end my presentation there and pass this off to Nada. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Yasmin. Thank you for sharing with us. I don't know. I just want to say, like, this is quite difficult to hear and listen. I think many of us are listening to this and you're like, oh, like how is this happening? How are we allowing this? But also making connections with how our different communities from around the world are also facing different kinds of oppression. But a lot of it is, there's like a lot of similarities, as someone just mentioned in the chat. And you're like, you hear a pipeline, you're like, oh, okay, that, like, immediately you think about, okay, like it's also what's happening here. Yeah, it's like I don't know, money is always, capitalism and money and greed are usually core drivers behind all those acts, inhumane acts that we see. I am just gonna quickly share. I feel like more people know about what's happening in Palestine. Unfortunately, more people know about what's happening in Palestine than they know about what's happening in Burma. So I'm not gonna go in as much details. But I'll just go quickly over some of the stuff. Let me know if I can share my screen. I mean, it's only been almost 2 years of the pandemic. So you'd think I got this figured out. Cool. Yeah, so the story of Palestine in so many ways, it's been something that's quite talked about, I think, especially within the Muslim community. Honestly, I think it's really hard for me to find a Muslim person that doesn't know about Palestine or about some of the things that are happening there, or someone who doesn't feel, who's not in solidarity with Palestine. I mean, maybe, like, I think all of us grew up hearing about the struggles there. And I think having Masjid al-Aqsa there for Muslims makes it a bit more closer. I remember almost 2 years ago, I was in Cape Town, and as I was walking, I saw Palestinian flags around, like, in some of the homes. And to me, it was like so weird to see how alive the Palestinian struggle was, not just within the Palestinian community, but also outside of it. As you all know, like, the story of Palestine is really, you can't talk about Palestine without talking about colonialism, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. Many people think that what happened in Palestine is just really about a number of, or like a lot of people who were facing persecution because they were Jewish. They're like, oh, okay, we're facing persecution, we gotta go and find home in Palestine. But actually, the settler colonial project was happening way before the Holocaust, way before World War I and II. And it's been a plan that was set in motion a long time ago. And similar to what Yasmin was saying about Buddhism being used to justify, or like as a weaponized, I think that's the word that you used. In similar ways, like Judaism has also kind of been used in the same way. And now many of us think about anti-Semitism and I mean, if you say anything about Israel or about Zionism, you're immediately labeled as anti-Semitic. And this is kind of some of the ways how they've been able to silence so many people from around the world. Again, colonialism, you're thinking, to me, like when I think of colonialism, I think of like a system where, you're settler colonialism, you want to establish a state, a land, like a country for yourself, but that place already has people. And to do that, you're just going to be displacing them, getting rid of them. So ethnic cleansing is only a natural consequence of colonialism. And apartheid is when I feel, maybe I shouldn't talk about apartheid when there's South Africans in the room, but I feel in some ways, it's really a system that ensures a group will maintain its dominance or will increase their dominance over another. And in the case of Palestine, we're talking about people like, separate, like streets are made just for Israelis and Palestinians are not allowed to use. We're talking about water, hospitals, all of those things. It's like a complete segregation between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and something that continues to happen and increase, unfortunately. And that's aside from the blockade of Gaza. So my family actually comes from Gaza. My parents were displaced. My mom's side of the family were displaced in 1948. And that's when the first major ethnic cleansing was happening, where 80% of Palestinians became refugees or displaced internally or outside. And in 1967, the rest of my family was displaced and ended up leaving Palestine altogether. And they went to Egypt, like many other Palestinians. Egypt was the closest country to us. So they literally walked on foot, went to Egypt, And eventually they made their way to Libya, because in Egypt, it wasn't really easy for my family to be there. So I was born in Libya and I grew up there, but like many Palestinians, we were actually stateless for the majority of our lives. Most Palestinian refugees today are stateless. Stateless means that you have no rights, you have no country, you have no nation, you have no citizenship. You're just on your own for the most part. It also means, lack of access. If you don't have citizenship or belonging to a country, then your access to education is limited, your access to healthcare is limited, you can't travel, you can't, like, so many things are actually no longer available for you. I just want to show quickly the map of Palestine, which I think most of you are familiar with. That's Palestine 1897. Notice how in even this map, it says Tel Aviv here. Tel Aviv didn't exist, by the way, at that point, but somehow as Yara and I were looking for a better map, but we couldn't find one that didn't say Tel Aviv on it. Original name for Tel Aviv is actually Tel Rabia. It's an Arabic word. Anyways, but this map, or those images, document the loss of land that has happened ever since. And today we're, whatever is left of Palestine is very, very still kind of like, I don't, even then, like it's we have access to it. So as a Palestinian today, I cannot actually even go and visit, mostly even Gaza. Like, you cannot, even with my Canadian passport, I am not able, or will not be able or allowed to go to Gaza. I wanted to show an image that I saw last year, or just before the pandemic, when things were happening in Wet'suwet'en, and I was watching the news, and all of a sudden I was watching CTV. See, the quality of the picture is literally a picture of my TV. But as I was watching the blockade that some of the indigenous people have set up, I think this was in February 2020, and I again, like, issues with continuous oppression of indigenous folks here, justify, with pipelines and other reasons. But when they were attacking the Wet'suwet'en people up north, they some of the people established some blockades on the road. And as I was watching, I saw a Palestinian flag. I'm like, where did that come from? Right? I don't know if you guys can see it. It's right here. Right. And so I was like, I immediately took a picture of it and sent it to my family. But also, when that was happening, Palestinians in Palestine were also sending some messages of solidarity from there, about seeing from Palestine to Wet'suwet'en, and just notions of solidarity there. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And I bring this image to just say, like, it brought me so much joy to see, like, the different ways people try and show up in solidarity. Like, I mean, I don't even know if that person was thinking, like, okay, I'll have Palestinian flag. I don't think they recognize the impact that it would have for a Palestinian person that's watching. But in many ways, like, this really solidified how our struggles are quite connected, how our stories are quite connected. And in order for us to really be working towards liberation, we need to be working together, like, and not seeing our issues as just like, okay, like this, we only need to be talking about Palestine. And this is what irritates me the most, okay? And this comes from our own people, Palestinians and Muslims, okay? Every time anything happens and people are like, wow, like, Black Lives Matter, people will be like, Black Lives Matter, of course. And then I see Palestinians, whatever, it's like, well, people in Palestine are dying, right? Like, we need to focus on Palestine. And that really gets to me, because I don't know why we have to choose, like, I think if we saw the struggles that are actually common struggles that are it's a pattern. Like, I think the oppressors are united in this fight. Why can't we be also united in addressing it and not seeing these as different issues or a waste of time if we're focusing on Black Lives Matter and not on Palestine, or if we're focusing on Rohingya people and not on Palestine? Okay, of course, I talk too much. So where are we now? Yasmin, I am looking at you. I'm wondering if maybe we should, actually, can I ask if people have questions, and then we'll go into our questions, Yasmin? Is that okay? Change of
Sure, yeah, let's do that. Let's switch it up.
Great, thanks, Yasmin. So maybe I'll open it up and ask people, like, thoughts, reflections, questions, like what's coming up for you, and then we'll continue with our conversation.
I do have a question, but I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead a little bit. And this was it came up in our conversation when we were prepping for this. It's around like the idea of the state, right? That like, you know, even as we like struggle for sovereignty, or we struggle for our statehood, all of that is like buying into the notion of the nation state, and we're almost perpetuating the same. And I think the next speaker, Nandita Sharma, this afternoon will be speaking to this as well. But I'm curious to hear a little bit about that from each of you. Like, where is the struggle, and what is the struggle for in some ways?
Yeah, thanks, Aslan. Yasmin, you want to try to address that, and then I'll go.
Sure.
On.
Yeah. So for us, it's been really interesting how much settler colonialism has basically sown the seed so deeply within our own identity that it just becomes so intertwined. But I think that in a way it was you know, it was by design. It was actually done purposefully, so our people don't have the ability to conceptualize or think outside the box, think outside of the systemic, you know, oppression or the system that is already set up for us. If you compare it to years and years before this, prior to the oppression, prior to the state persecution, Rohingya were actually parts and parcel of how Myanmar became a nation. We were actually fighting on the same front as they did in order to chase the British colonial rule away and actually gain our own independence in 1948. Prior to that, the British also promised us, and this was, I think, the weakness that we've had, promised us, you know, that Arakan or Rakhine state today will become ours again, and without the, you know, without any Burmanization, or that it would be independent of the Burmanization and any like persecution from the Burma side, which was becoming more and more powerful. So prior to the British colonization, it was already the Burman that came and basically destroyed some of the elements that we've had, that we've held on to for a very long time. So when we were, you know, it's sort of like a cycle of victimization. Once you become a victim, you continue to become, you know, a victim over and over and over again. And obviously the British actually, you know, broke their promises and made us this very disempowered and disenfranchised group of people. And then the land that the ancestral land of ours became even more precarious, and the idea that we have ownership of those lands become really it became a pipe dream, because not only with the Buddhist model citizen archetype have become a tool for the Myanmar military and the Myanmar leadership to actually dispossess our land, to actually take away our rights, but it also became a way for them to actually tell us that we no longer have the autonomy or the agency over our own ancestral lands, that the lands that we know very well. And guess what? What they did was they redistributed some of those lands to other people. And the crops never grow because they don't have the epistemology or you know, the knowledge of the lands well enough that they could actually make use of those lands. So now they actually dispossess it for foreign investments, for more people to actually extract resources out of them. So nation states have become like the unification or the idea of nation state have become a source of pain for ethnic groups, not just for Rohingya, but for all ethnic groups within Myanmar. And the idea that they need to gain citizenship, that they need permission from the state, have become the way for the nation state to actually, or the settler colonial state, including British and including the Burman right now, to actually erase our culture and erase who we are and erase our connection to the land.
This is me. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And just to add, like, as growing up as stateless, our dream was also like just getting a citizenship, just like any nation, please accept us. Like, born in Libya, my family was in Libya for decades. And we were never seen as Libyans. We were always considered stateless. My paperwork is like, what country you're from, it says like stateless on it. And so that was a real, of course, like it has a real impact on us. And so we always dreamt of gaining citizenship to a nation, any nation, right? But I think the problem in that thinking is that we're often thinking about who belongs to what nation, but we're left not thinking about why are there actually nation states. Like, we're not actually problematizing the notion of nation state to begin with, and we're left thinking, yeah, like I just want to belong here. Like the getting Canadian citizenship. I remember when I first heard the Canadian national anthem, of course, this is me more than 10 years ago, fresh to Canada, all of a sudden we have a home, we have a country, we have a passport, right? I mean, I didn't even get a passport at that point, but, like thinking like, oh my gosh, I have rights. And I remember hearing the national anthem at my high school, and I literally cried because I was like, oh, like that's my country. Right. And like that, for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Now looking back at that, I was like, oh, like how problematic is that, right? Because in many ways, and this is a conversation that I had with Aslam, like I talk about Palestine, what's happening there. And honestly, what made Israel become Israel today is a lot of it is the people that went there, the settlers that went there. Like a country without people won't happen. So Israel needed people to go to Palestine to establish a nation there. And same thing about Canada, right? Canada needs people to come here. Like all of us being here, we're supporting we're a colonial settler state. Whether we want it or not, you pay taxes that support an army or police that then goes and oppresses, right? We support, even our own places of residence, right? Or the farms or where we grow food. A lot of these places or the parks we go to, these belong to people, these were the homes of Indigenous people. And by default, the moment we come here, we're displacing those folks. And we do it sometimes not knowing, like coming to Canada, we didn't even know Indigenous people existed in Canada. And that wasn't a story that we heard before coming here, right? My family thought of Canada as like a home, like, as we have no place to go to. Any place that will accept us, we'll go. And so we immediately came without thinking what it means, like without actually even doing our work on what is this place that we're going to, aside from the fact that it's a first world country, we get a citizenship, and it's like the equivalent of the American dream, but in this case, it's like a Canadian dream. We forget that, if you think about nation states, like 100 years ago, the world looked so different. And today we can't imagine a world without nation state. Like those borders that we have today, like they didn't actually exist the same way before. And yet right now we have a hard time imagining like a life without it, imagining a life without different countries. Like I don't know, I think I do hope that one day we can go beyond like thinking about who belongs in Canada and being like, oh, we're so outsiders, blah, blah, blah. Like we want to belong to like, what is Canada? Like, what do we even have? Like, just problematizing the whole notion of a settler state. And I also kind of want to make a distinction between people who come here as immigrants today, as refugees, and undocumented folks or stateless folks, and people who came here as settler, as part of the initial wave of colonization. I think it's hard for me to think of colonization and immigration differently nowadays, because I think we equate them to be the same. A lot of the times we equate them to be the same thing. I really do believe the land belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like Allah, the land of Allah is vast, and I don't think ownership over land in the way it is today I don't think it makes sense to me anyways. I think so movement should be okay in itself. So I'm not saying that people should never come to Turtle Island, but I think coming to colonize is an issue, and now today coming to support a colonial state is an issue. I'm all over the place, but I see a hand. Shavala, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to mention an old prophecy that came from my ancestors through oral storytelling. And it actually says that we were told, I guess you could say, we had prophets among our tribes, as Islam also says would happen. And so some of our prophecies told us that a group of people who were non-believers, those who chose not to follow the law of our Creator, they would come and they would set up a governance. They would attempt and succeed at setting up a governance globally that would divide and conquer the tribal people. So it would actually conquer those who are believers. And along with that prophecy came the belief and the hope that in the future, which we believe, I believe anyways, that we're in that time now, the end of times, where we would actually gain power and momentum by remembering who we are, remembering our brotherhood, remembering that we're all connected. And so that has really resonated with me, because as we're doing this work and I see that we're realizing the tactics that were used in the Middle East or in any part of the world are the same that the tribal people here are suffering in Mexico, all over the world, the same tactics. And that's the tactics of that governance, that global entity that seems to come in and want to oppress us. They've set that up. But I see that as we're uniting and creating our network and realizing that actually we're not different, we're the same, we're just from different tribes. That's where our power seems to be coming from. And that was directly linked to the prophecy that said, and then they would remember that they're brothers and sisters, and the human governance model or that state would just disintegrate easily. And I think we're fast approaching that. And I'm always curious to hear what Islam has to say about that. But yeah, that's just a little thought I wanted to share with you all.
Thank you, Jawala.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments, questions? Also feel free to post them in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Just before you, Karen. Hi, Talitha. I wanted to welcome Talitha to the table because she's a Soquetan tribal sister from my territory, and we work very closely together on many different levels of grassroots movement for the global, for all of us. So thank you for joining, Talitha.
Awesome. Yasmin, I think you had a reflection or comment on.
I just wanted to go back to your point earlier, Neda, about the idea of sovereignty. I think the idea of sovereignty that is perpetuated or basically acted out by neo-colonial or neoliberal nations, specifically like the Western democracy, have always been about drawing more borders, drawing from basically accumulating more power economically, politically, or socially. And I think most of the time when we look back at our own traditions or our own culture, or even the indigenous culture, it isn't like the idea of nationhood or the idea of sovereignty isn't actually based upon greed or an understanding that if we give away something, we don't get it back. I think from my own tradition, or from the Rohingya tradition that's been lost and erased, we've never actually had a moment of genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity like this, when we were coexisting with our brothers and sisters from other ethnic communities that also exist in Arakan or in our own homeland. It wasn't always about, this is mine, that's yours, and it's separate. If you have it, that means I don't have it. Like, it's very, very, very black and white, which is not the case for our people. And it's actually something that is shared in a lot of traditions around ethnic communities that are, that exist, all across Myanmar. So that idea of sovereignty has become such a pivotal role, like plays a pivotal role in not only oppressing other people, in drawing the line, in creating more conflicts, but it also is used and weaponized when people like Rohingya people or other communities from Myanmar who've been oppressed by the military junta ask for help from the international community, because there are legal precedents exist in the international law, in the legal realm, to actually stop any war crimes or crimes against humanity. But the international community, especially Canada and the US, would always cite sovereignty as something that they cannot violate. That's something, even if someone is actually dying within that country, they're being persecuted so badly that the entire group of people can be annihilated. But these nation states cannot possibly violate the sovereignty of the nation, of the nationhood of Myanmar. So I think there probably are certain similarities that you can draw. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I think that it's very, very absurd.
Thanks, Yasmin. I think I'll just, I see Aslam posted about how Islam is also used sometimes or weaponized to also to oppress and displace other people from around the world. And I think yeah, it's that's true. And I think it is also our responsibility to not only see ourselves as the victims of like all these global powers, all these things, like we're the victims here, like look at us, we need anyways, all of that stuff, but actually recognize how we play a role in displacing others also elsewhere. And I find this sometimes true in our communities, is that whenever there's like an issue or tension in our community, we try to hide it or we shy away from it, like we don't want to be discussing the problems that we have in our communities, but they do exist and we have them. And I think we need to, I think we need spaces where we can think of those, like, I don't know, our responsibility as Muslims towards other ethnic or indigenous groups or different marginalized communities within Muslim countries that we have today, or within our own people here. Like, it's not common for us to hear comments like, I don't know, some of the discrimination that new Muslims face in our communities, or some of the I don't know, discrimination that or racism that our Black sisters and brothers face in our mosques, for example, and the list goes on. And I think we brought up Buddhism and Judaism being both weaponized in this case because we're context specific, but of course, like, I think you could weaponize everything. I mean, Christianity, look what was been done in the name of Christianity. Like, look at what's happened here. And now when we're talking about the genocide that our government has committed, and the graves that were the graves that are being discovered today, and a lot of it was done in the name of Christianity. So I think any ideology could really be weaponized and used, and it's our responsibility as Muslims to see how we can unpack those and see, like, what is our role, what is our responsibility when any of those things happen. It's easy to be like, oh, those are the governments, those are back homes, but actually, like, think about our own daily actions here. When we think about our own families, our own Muslim communities and friends. I also, I don't know if there's another question or not. Feel free to post them in the chat. Right.
There are 3 hands up.
Oh, there's 3 hands up. Oh, great questions. I'm not sure, Jawala, is that from earlier? You just want to be like, I'm here the whole time? Okay, great. Cynthia.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I just have a question regarding how we think about colonization and decolonization. I mean, I'm from Mexico, I live in Mexico, and I'm an anthropologist, and I see this with these glasses and not as an indigenous person, no? Like, I have many, many privileges. So one of those privileges is having read this article, I don't know if you know it, which is called "Decolonization is Not a Metaphor." and it made this in my brain, like boom, no? Because I was doing this research in the US about Latino Muslims. And then when I read that paper, it was something like, okay, yeah, I'm interacting with this group in Los Angeles who is claiming for social justice. And Eve Talk and Wayne Yang said that, okay, it's good, social justice, but when there are these identity politics in the middle, you may reclaim some things for you, but you are, especially for Native American people in Turtle Island, you are claiming something like, for example, an immigrant or I don't know, an illegalized or legalized person. So you are maybe claiming something because you are a Latino person, and then what's going on with the genocide of Native people who is totally hidden and you don't see it. But for example, I'm from Mexico, and then I see how the nation state is kind of offering some things to indigenous people here. And then I didn't know anything about the situation in Canada, for example. No, like we are very close, but at the same time, we don't understand each, our fights. And then it's I don't know, it's curious for me because after reading that from Native American activists in Turtle Island, I question myself and I think, so if I vote, for example, I'm going to increase the power of the nation state, no? Or if I don't know, maybe I'm a kind of extremist person because I would like to say I don't want to invest anymore in the nation state. But at the same time, I see how, for example, Central American people from Africa, people from other places are entering the south border of Mexico, which is more or less the US border in Mexico, no? Because they are forbidding Central American people to enter in Mexico in order to get asylum in the US. So I don't know how to deal with this idea of nation state. What should I do regarding that? Like, and at the same time is how can I create solidarity and how we could create an ethic of dissent. I mean, it's very difficult. So I don't know. I mean, I have an experience as an anthropologist, as a reader, but it outside of the academia, what should I do with the Muslims, my brothers and sisters in other communities? For example, like people who criticize me because I'm a Latina Muslim and I'm not Arab-born, or you know, like. There is also Arab supremacism in some masajid. So there are many things, like, I don't know, like holding this power of the colonial structure everywhere. Sorry, I took a lot of time, but it's my frustration there.
Yeah. I think we all kind of go through that phase, no? And I don't think that I'm completely immune to it either. I know that it's really, really confusing sometimes, and I don't have an answer for you. Just as an answer, like one short answer. But I also know that we all can do internal work to understand some of those things in relation to us, right? I'm currently still learning, and I think that a lot of us are in trying to be a good ally to our brothers and sisters around the world. For example, like if I can support a cause that is not my own and help uplift the voice of, you know, other communities. For example, there was I work with a few young people from various different nations in East Asia and Southeast Asia, and there is a hashtag online on Twitter called Milk Tea Alliance, and that is basically depicting some of the you know traditions, traditional drinks that we all have within different countries. Hong Kong has its own milk tea, Southeast Asia have a lot of different milk teas that we also drink, like drawing on those. And then we actually band together as a group that work to support the dissidents within all these nations. And as you know, probably that Hong Kong, the Chinese, the CCP, the Communist Party that belongs to, China actually try to create a lot of conflicts within the country, within Hong Kong, especially inflicting a lot of harms on the protesters who want democracy, who want democracy becoming basically a way of governance in Hong Kong. So we, drawing from their strength and drawing from their solidarity to us in the Rohingya community and in Myanmar now, because Myanmar is also going through another, this is the third one of our coup d'etat. The military is overthrowing our quasi-democratically elected government, even though that's not the best case scenario, but now we have a better idea of what we want as a nation, which is federal democracy, even though it's still confined within, the idea of nationhood or nation states. It's still a lot better than what we have had, which is military dictatorship. And so, Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, now Myanmar, Iran, lots of these different basically young people who are basically organizers and movement leaders, like democratic movement leaders or activists who are joining hands to create a solidarity movement, to understand, to learn about one another. I think this was one of a very, very important movement that I've seen and have been privileged to be part of. I think that it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be done in this way, but something like that should be something we aspire to be, or something much better if there are means and obviously resources to do so. I'm not saying that this was the best case scenario, because probably if we don't have the restrictions from wherever we are, or the kind of political instability that we all have to go through, we'd probably be able to do a lot more. But this is just the start, and I see a lot of understanding. I see a lot of work being done, and that's in our own pace. You don't have to. There isn't a right way to do it, if I may say that. There isn't really a right way to do activism or a right way to stand in solidarity. I think it has to be first just reaching out to another community and just listen. That should be the first step in all cases. And whatever you come out, whatever the fruit of the labor becomes, I hope that it would be beneficial to you and to the other communities as well. Sorry for taking so long.
I don't apologize. Thanks, Yasmin. I have a comment as well in response, but I also see Itrath's hand. Or how about you? Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm just going to unmute myself. Yeah, this is a bit past now, but when we were discussing, when Islam posted about how Islam can be weaponized, I was thinking that obviously there's a lot of geopolitical instances where that happens, but it also happens in our lived experiences as in terms of culturally, as seeing as Islam as some fossilized thing that is here to displace indigenous cultures or local cultures or regional cultures and languages and aesthetic traditions and music and other things. And I think that we need to be really thoughtful about the way that is experienced. And I was thinking about it in terms of Jabala, your comment from previous the previous session where you were talking about wearing hijab and not wearing hijab. And one of the things that I wanted to just say that it's Islam is not meant to displace your culture. It's not meant to displace your history or your tradition, and it's not. And even though for many of us outside of the Arab context, Islam can be experienced that way. It can be articulated and weaponized in a way to displace our local traditions. And I think we have to be really conscious of resisting that.
Yeah, and if I can just follow up on that comment too, when I first did Shahada and I put the hijab on, and then I remember a point when I became really fed up with some of the Muslim judgments, I guess you could say, against me. I remember I took my hijab off and I braided my hair and I went to the masjid, and the masjid was full of some very, very strong Iranian sisters. Thankfully, there was a white sister there who had suffered some alienation feelings as well when she did Shahada. Thankfully, that sister was also very connected to the tribal communities in Kamloops to Kamloops area. And some of her best friends were tribal. And so when I walked in, I remember her just, mashallah, subhanallah, thank you, come in. And as the Iranian sisters were like, well, she took her hijab off. What's she doing here with no covering? And they run to grab me the scarf. Well, this sister, she said, no, leave her. She has her hijab. Her braids are her hijab. And that's exactly true. Like, not only like in my culture, it wasn't for me a matter of, okay, Islam is making me think about leaving my culture. It wasn't about that. It was like, okay, how can I step forward and show the sisters and Muslims that we, the tribe, also have our ways of worshiping. And one of those is, again, the indication of having the covering. And for us, our braids were the hijab. So when you see a tribal woman with her braids in, she's usually in prayer or she's in ceremony, or to her, that is her indication to those looking at her that she is covered by her creator, and she's putting that forward as she arrives to you. So that's just all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry to hear about your experience. That sounds brutal. I don't know, I as an Arab, I feel like there's a lot of work that we Arabs need to do around this notion of Arab supremacy. But if you allow me, is it okay if I can go back to the comment that was mentioned earlier about like being really overwhelmed by how much injustice there is and how well organized the oppressors are, or how powerful the oppressors are? And the thought that came to my mind when you were sharing, Cynthia, is I never checked this hadith, the authenticity of it, but I'm pretty sure it's authentic. But there's a hadith that says, like, if you were to witness the day of judgment, so the day of judgment is happening, like you're out there and you see the day of judgment is happening, and you have a little, what is it called? A plant in your hand, right? Yeah. Then go and plant it. And that's like the thing, hadith that I go and think of. It's like, the world is coming to an end. It's the day of judgment. Like, khalas, this is it. We're done. And if you have a plant in your hand, then you go and you plant it. And to me, it sounds like, why would you do that? Like, what's the point? And I really think of that hadith often when I think about our context today. Like, I don't know if our efforts will make a big difference. I like, the way I think of it is, it's really what Allah asks of us is to put in the work, to put in the effort. The outcome is really up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just knowing that it's, no matter what, like, I'm going to be super religious on you for a few seconds, okay? So sorry. My dad would be proud. But there's also another hadith that says, Amr Muslim or Mu'min, the matters or the affairs of the Muslims are always good. Sorry, help me with the translation, people. You probably heard this hadith. That like the affairs of the Muslims are always good. So if things are really difficult, like no matter what, there's always khair, there's always benefit, there's always good in whatever context, whatever you face. And I just think of that all the time. So these two hadiths that, like, no, just put in the effort, and no matter what happens, it's like really up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's always some khair, some benefit for it in us, for us, regardless of what happens. Sorry, see, like my super Muslimness is usually in Arabic, so it's hard for me to translate in English. So I probably lost a bunch of people in my attempts to explain this. But what I'm really trying to say is, no matter how overwhelmed we feel, like it should not. Oh, look, Asif, thank you for saving me. Yeah, so like no matter how little our actions might seem or feel or insignificant, it's not in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and it's the least we could be doing, right? Like we shouldn't be like, oh, this is not going to make a difference, so I'm not going to even try. I think that's a problem. Like, and I see that in a lot of Muslim people say this, oh, the world's going to end anyway, so why bother? Oh, there's like a prophecy that the oppressors are going to take over anyways. Like, so why bother fight? Why bother try? And there's so much in our own in our teachings that says like, actually, no, you should bother, you should try. And I think that's where we need to be sitting for the most part. Like even if it's a small plant, in the day of judgment, the world's coming to an end, and still plant it. So that's one thing that reminds me. It's got a constant reminder. Oh, it's 11. And the other thing I want to say is, like, when we talk about revolutions, we talk about bringing down governments, and we often forget like small relationships. I honestly think revolution starts with like asking someone for a cup of coffee or tea, and just like really build relationships. I don't think we know how to build relationships. I don't think we know how to be with each other, and the pandemic made it even harder. So like small steps. Like I think I cannot be really in solidarity with Indigenous people if I don't even know who they are or where they are, if I've never even talked to them. Like, so what most of us know about Indigenous people is what we hear about them, and we don't even have a relationship. So like, let's just start small. And I'm gonna shut up. Whoa, I see so many hands. Aslam, we're out of time. Tell me what to do.
Maybe we can just take one last comment from Idris while Nandita is over here. So Nandita can get a little bit of a sense of what we've been talking about, because I think it might flow somewhat smoothly and maybe somewhat less coherently, but maybe the last comment, and then we'll hand over to Nandita.
Sorry, I don't have a comment. I just don't know how to lower
your hand. Okay.
Figuring it out.
Before we end, can I just quickly mention something? I think that sometimes we're very disillusioned by like the amount of injustice that happened around the world, but just a story that happened like right after the first the 1st of February. Myanmar has gone through some really, really huge changes within the country, where the Burman, the people who have had their hands in enabling the Myanmar military, have now turned to a lot of ethnic communities and apologize. And some of them actually created a campaign called a National Apology Day. That would not have been something that would be, we didn't even, it didn't even cross our mind that something like that would ever happen. But also, since we've talked about a lot of like ideas of nation states and like neoliberalism, where corporations actually helped these nation state oppressing people more. A company that has a headquarter in Vancouver called Kirin had actually cut the ties with the Myanmar military. And the Myanmar military actually gets a lot of money from international corporations and nation states, investments, and a lot more like business ties in enabling them to buy more weapons, to buy more, more of everything to further persecute ethnic communities around the country. And I think Kirin cutting ties with the Myanmar military is a very monumental gesture, also a very monumental step that has basically signified a little bit of success, even though it is not everything. It has not stopped the military from persecuting us. It actually means that the years of activism, the years of us and other ethnic communities within Myanmar and the international friends that we've had worked in some ways, that they are listening. So that's one success story that that comes out of that. And I think that sometimes we're so focused on what is wrong, but we're forgetting that there are also things that can come out, accomplishments that come out of us just working hard and trying to be basically be together and understanding each other and helping each other in every way possible. So yeah, there are potentials to this. If we do more, we will get to see more work. And like Nada said, it starts from just listening. It starts from just building a really strong relationship.
Thank you so much, Yasmin and Nada, for joining us and sharing your thoughts. And once again, it's been a wide-ranging conversation, everything from lived experience of Islam, relationship building for solidarity, the role of corporations and international actors within statehood and our conceptions of statehood.